Hello students, today we will be studying the development of alimentary system, part first, that is the development of the foregut. So this will be covering the competency of anatomy 52.6, which describes the development of the foregut, midgut and hindgut and their congenital anomalies. So our specific learning objectives are that you should be able to describe the development of esophagus and its applied aspect, explain the embryological basis of hypertrophic pyloric stenosis. You should be able to enumerate the derivatives of mesenteries and the lesser omentum and how they are formed, formation of liver and spleen and the duodenum, and the embryological basis of annular pancreas. So how the gut tube is formed. So development of the gut tube proper, it involves four major steps. There is a continuous elongation of the primitive gut, then there is a physiological herniation past the body wall, and then there is rotation and folding for efficient packaging back into the body cavity, then the histogenesis, and finally the functional maturation of the primitive gut. So firstly, this diagram is showing the folding of the embryo in a cephalocaudal direction. This is the head fold which is being formed, and this is the tail fold. So the longitudinal folding and the transverse folding of the embryo during third and fourth week, it converts a flat trilaminar embryonic disc into a trilaminar elongated cylinder. So this leads to entrapment of the primitive gut into the developing embryo. So this primitive gut, it has been entrapped in the embryo because of the folding. So the alimentary tract, it develops from this primitive gut. So on the formation of this head fold, and this over here is the tail fold, the part of definitive yolk sac, it is trapped into the developing embryo. Now, what are the different parts of this primitive gut? The primitive gut, it communicates with the yolk sac through vitellointestinal duct and the allantoic diverticulum, which was given in the tail fold at the time of cephalocaudal folding. So, the cranial part of the gut, which lies in the head fold, which is bound anteriorly by the stomodeum and posteriorly by the interior intestinal portal, which corresponds to the opening of the common bile duct, is known as foregut. Then the midgut, it is bounded anteriorly by this anterior intestinal portal and posteriorly by the posterior intestinal portal. So this part which lies opposite this vitellointestinal duct is the midgut, and the part which is in the tail fold is the hindgut. So it is bound by posterior intestinal portal and the proctodium. Both the stomodeum and proctodium are bilaminar structures with ectoderm and endoderm adherently uh, uh, together. They are adhered together with each other at these two places. Now the blood supply via mesenteries. So the primitive gut, it is supplied by celiac trunk, which is the artery of the foregut, superior mesenteric artery, which is the artery of the midgut, and the inferior mesenteric artery, which is the artery for hindgut. So the derivatives of the foregut are esophagus, stomach, the liver, and the gallbladder, upper part of the duodenum, and the pancreas. Similarly, the midgut, it is giving rise to lower part of the duodenum behind the common bile duct, then the jejunum, ileum, the cecum, appendix, ascending colon, and the proximal two-thirds of the transverse colon. Now, this proximal two-thirds of the transverse colon, it is corresponding to this posterior intestinal portal. Now the hindgut, it is giving rise to distal one-third of the transverse colon along with the descending colon, then the sigmoid colon, rectum, and the upper part of the anal canal. So all these are derived from the primitive gut. Now the histogenesis of the GIT. So the endoderm, it forms the epithelial lining of the digestive tract, and it gives rise to some specific cells of the glands such as hepatocytes and exocrine and endocrine cells of the pancreas. Rest of all the layers, that is the lamina propria, muscularis mucosae, The submucosa, muscularis externa, and the serosa, they are all derived by the visceral mesoderm, that is planktochloric mesoderm. Now, there is a certain rule which is followed by the GIT as a whole, that early in the development it is a hollow tube. Then the epithelial proliferation is there, which obliterates the lumen and converts it into a solid stage. And then finally, clefts are formed, and and these clefts, they will unite and they will lead to recanalization of this solid tube. Now, there are certain structures which are intraperitoneal, retroperitoneal, and secondarily retroperitoneal organs. Now, the organs which are formed by this is an embryo which is during the folding stage. So this one is from dorsal to ventral side. If we take, this one is the nabral tube, notochord, dorsal aorta, which will give its branches via this dorsal mesentery to the developing gut. This is the paraaxial mesoderm. This is the intermediate mesoderm, which will give rise to kidneys and the gonads. And the lateral plate mesoderm has been divided by this intraembryonic coelom into splanchno-chloric and somatochloric layers. So this intermediate mesoderm, since it is giving rise to the kidney, so that will be a retroperitoneal organ. Now this gut, it is being suspended by this dorsal mesentery. Now over here, the lateral folding is continuous, and the two layers of this splanchno-chloric mesoderm, they will come and unite, and this will form the dorsal mesentery. So over here you can see now the dorsal mesentery. So these organs which are derived from this primitive gut, which is being suspended in the intraperitoneal this cavity, they are the intraperitoneal organs. Then gradually some organs, because of the rotation, the dorsal layer of this mesentery is being lost in the due course of time, and they become retroperitoneal. So such organs, they are secondarily retroperitoneal organs. For example, pancreas or duodenum, which were initially developing inside this intraembryonic coelom, but later on, because of the rotation of the gut, they will become secondary retroperitoneal organs as they are pushed against the body wall. Now, what is mesentery? It is a collection of connective tissue that maintains the gut tube and its derivatives in their normal anatomical position. So, in the abdomen, the dorsal mesentery, it extends from lower portion of the esophagus to the rectum, whereas the ventral mesentery is only present beneath the stomach till the first part of the duodenum. So, this dorsal mesentery, it provides a pathway for blood vessels, lymphatics, and nerves to the gut tube and their derivatives. So there are different parts of mesentery according to the position. Behind the stomach, it is known as dorsal mesogastrium, which overhangs from its greater curvature is greater omentum, which is behind the developing duodenum is mesoduodenum. The part which is attached to the small intestine is mesentery proper, which is attached to the colon is mesocolon, which is attached to the appendix is mesoappendix, which is opposite sigmoid colon is mesosigmoid, and which is opposite the rectum is the mesorectum. So these are different parts of the dorsal mesentery. So just a gist of the foregut. So over here you can see this one is the foregut. So because of the appearance of tracheoesophageal groove, this foregut is now being divided into a pre-laryngeal part and a post-laryngeal part. So pre-laryngeal part will give rise to pharynx and the floor of mouth, and the post-laryngeal part will be giving rise to esophagus, stomach, liver and gallbladder, pancreas, and upper part of the duodenum till hepatopancreatic duct or the major duodenal papilla. Then comes the midgut. It again gets divided by a cecal bud into a pre-cecal part and a post-cecal part. So pre-cecal part will be giving rise to lower part of the duodenum, jejunum and ileum, whereas post-cecal part will give rise to cecum, appendix, ascending colon, and the proximal two-third of the transverse colon. Then comes the hindgut. Now it is again divided into two parts by this allantoic diverticulum into a pre-allantoic part and a post-allantoic part. So pre-allantoic part give rise to distal one-third of the transverse colon, descending colon and the sigmoid colon, whereas post-allantoic part will give rise to rectum and upper anal canal. The lower anal canal will be derived from the proctorium or the cloaca. That will be ectodermal in origin. So now we'll start with the development of the foregut. So in this section, I'll be dealing only with the development of esophagus. So firstly, the esophagus develop. In the development, there is a, in the lower part of the pharynx, you can see there is a appearance of laryngotracheal groove that will later form the tracheobronchial diverticulum. This is the tracheobronchial diverticulum. So there is appearance of the tracheoesophageal septum. Over here you can see this one is the tracheoesophageal septum, which divides the part of the foregut caudal to the tracheobronchial diverticulum into a ventral trachea and a dorsal esophagus. So this small esophagus, it will elongate due to the formation of neck and the descent of diaphragm, lungs and heart. So this is how esophagus is formed by the elongation of the primitive esophagus. So over here, this model you can see in the Department of Anatomy over here. So over here, this one is the ventral part. This is the developing tracheoesophageal septum at the fourth peak. There is an appearance of the lung bud from the ventral wall of the foregut. This tracheoesophageal septum, it divides it into ventral and the dorsal part. The ventral part forms the respiratory primordia, whereas the dorsal part will form the esophagus, and due to the lengthening of the neck and the descent of lungs and heart, it gets elongated. Now the coats of the esophagus, they are same, I have told you, that is the endodermal layer will give rise to the mucosa, the epithelial lining, whereas the connective tissue coat of the splanchnopluric mesoderm, uh, the splanchnopluric mesoderm will give rise to the connective tissue coat, that is stroma, and the muscular layer. The upper one-third of the striated muscles, middle one-third is the mixed muscle, and lower one-third is the smooth muscles. Now, there are certain congenital anomalies related to the development of esophagus. So, first one is the esophageal atresia, occurs when the tracheoesophageal septum deviates too far dorsally, causing the esophagus to end as a closed tube. So, about 33% of the patients with the esophageal atresia also have other congenital defects associated with beta, that is vertebral defects, anal atresia, tracheoesophageal fistula, and renal defects, or vectoral, similar to the beta, along with the cardiovascular defects. So over here you can see the tracheoesophageal septum, it has deviated dorsally. So it will cause an atresia of the upper part of the esophagus, so that it is not connected with the lower part, and the lower part has the connection with the trachea. So you can see the bubble in the stomach, just beneath, air in the diaphragm beneath the stomach when you get a radiograph done, and then there is a frequent vomiting after every feed. So this is the clinical condition which will be associated with this esophageal atresia if it is of the upper segment. This is the most common anomaly, and rest of the types you can see in the development of the respiratory system. I have discussed the other varieties of the tracheoesophageal fistulas in that chapter. So it is also associated with the polyhydramnios, where fetus is unable to swallow the amniotic fluid. So amniotic fluid is more than the usual, the production of amniotic fluid is more. So such condition is known as polyhydramnios. And there is highlight of tens. So what is this? The word esophagus has 10 alphabets in itself. Now the length of the esophagus is 10 inches. It pierces the diaphragm at the level of 10th thoracic vertebrae. And if the number 10 catheter is passed in a newborn, and in case it gets obstructed at the mark 10, as it has got the markings at the level of the lips. So diagnosis of tracheoesophageal fistula, it is confirmed. So this is the rule of 10 in case of esophagus. Then we have esophageal stenosis when the lumen of the esophagus is very narrow. So it is usually involving the mid-esophagus. Main cause is because of the hypertrophy of the muscularis externa layer, or there may be remnants of the tracheal cartilaginous ring within the wall of the esophagus, and in rare condition there may be incomplete recanalization of the esophagus. So all these are the causes of esophageal stenosis. Then there is another condition which is known as eclasia, which is loss of the ganglion cells in the myenteric plexus. So it is characterized by failure of relaxation of the esophageal sphincter. So this will cause progressive dysphagia, that is increasing dysphagia, and difficulty in swallowing. So in our radiograph, you will see a typical bird beak deformity in a barium swallow. Then there is a condition which is known as esophageal duplication, which most commonly occur due to congenital esophageal cyst, which is usually found in the lower part of the esophagus. And duplication cyst may lie on the posterior aspect of the esophagus, where they protrude into the posterior mediastinum. So in the next part, I will be discussing the development of the